Hi everyone, I want to introduce you to my new side project. It's called VibeQuest and it is kind of a game, or at least it feels a bit like a game, where you can learn the pros and cons of various ways to use Airtable as the backend for web application, and it's going to take you through that in a way that is less daunting. But for this video right now, I'm just going to take you through it in a much drier format. I'll cut through this because the goal here is that I just want to show you, if you're an Airtable user, the fastest way from A to B for getting set up with Claude, why you should use it with Airtable, what you can do and what you should not do if you are experimenting. So some things to definitely avoid. So let's jump in. Firstly, I use Claude with Airtable. If you haven't seen, Airtable has new documentation. It's not just the web API documentation now. It has a whole new section about agent tools, and this, you don't really need to read almost any of this. It shows that Airtable are focused on this, and it does work incredibly well. The agent can create almost everything in Airtable that you would usually have to do manually. There's a million ways, but one way that I use it is instead of going to Airtable and clicking here and creating a table and right-clicking and creating fields and creating records, I barely touch Airtable anymore. Every time I have a new project, I create a chat on Claude on the web. So this is not Claude Code and it is not on my desktop. And the reason for that is that we're not writing code, we're just using the Airtable connector to interact with Airtable. And it's on the web because I want to have the exact same chat on my phone or on my other laptop or wherever, and I want to be able to access it. So it's just like an assistant. And I give it information and it stores it in Airtable. It doesn't just add it there, it creates new tables if it needs to. It makes decisions very smartly about which tables there should be, which fields there should be, and it links things to each other. It doesn't just save time, it increases your capabilities a lot. And it saves on the cognitive exhaustion that comes from using Airtable for years and years and years. And the 10 millionth time of creating a field or creating a link is just, it had become tedious. But now, using it this way, it is a dream. And then once all the data is in there, it collects the info. At any time, you can ask it to give you back info or new information. So it's like a retrieval augmented generation as well. It's a second brain, it's a long-term memory, whatever you want to call it. It can build the memory in a structured way that relates things to each other and categorizes them, which the usual methods of using just markdown documents doesn't do. Everything's just a document. It has to read through them. It can have headings and stuff, but the hierarchy is very limited, whereas this is a proper relational database. This is a better way to store data. And then the other aspect of this is that once everything is in here, you can build apps on top of it, also using Claude, but using some different methods, which I'm going to take you through now. Right? Why should you learn this stuff? Because if you don't learn it, you are not making progress towards the future. All right. These are valuable skills to know in any case. Just bite the bullet and learn some of this stuff. Secondly, I'm not recommending you become like a full-fledged developer. I'm saying be somewhat brave and ambitious and try to learn some of these new things at a reasonable level. Look, every time you go for the absolute easiest option, you just end up paying more and more every month. You get locked in and you are never going to get it as cheaply or with as much capability as just using whoever is producing the language model. So you can use hosted, managed platforms. Behind the scenes, almost all of them are just buying credits from Anthropic or OpenAI, and they're selling it to you at a very high markup. And they make their profit. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but for you, if you're an Airtable enthusiast, you should just try and go with me through this process and learn just these few key points, and you will be equipped to do some amazing things. Connecting Claude to Airtable, you just go to settings here, and then you just go to connectors, and that's really all you need to do. You can then follow the process. Incredibly simple. But this is all related to building a web app. You want to use Claude Code specifically on the desktop. And this sounds complicated. And if you just try and do it by yourself, it is complicated. It was complicated for me because there are so many different flavors. Even Claude Code on desktop could be misinterpreted as the CLI version that proper developers use. You go to Claude, or you just search for Claude Desktop. You download it, and then you install it. And once it's running on your desktop, so Windows or Mac, I would recommend that you just go straight away and get a $20 a month Pro plan. And then once it's running on your desktop, you just open it up and connect Airtable. And you want to make sure that you're in code. Okay, so that's the other thing. It's got a bunch of different functionalities. If you're building an app, you just want to go make sure you're in code. Then, as an aside from that, you want to choose a folder that is like the one that makes sense to you on your computer for your projects. And that's where you keep all of your projects, and each project has its own folder within that. So the next thing is GitHub. You just create a free GitHub account. This is a brand new account. You don't need to pay anything. You don't need any subscription. You sign in. You can use Google Login. It takes 2 seconds. This sounds complicated as well. This used to be something that only developers needed to do. You are definitely going to need to learn how to do this, and it is not that difficult. If you just skip or rationalize that like this was a developer tool, so it's going to look super complicated and it's going to do a million things that you never need to touch. You only need to know how to create a repo. So a repo is a code repository. That's just a folder. It's what the files of your application live in. Pull, that's just pulling it to your computer. And these are all in one thing together. Commit and push. If you just tell Claude to commit, it's not going to push. And if you just tell it to push, it might get confused. So create, pull, and then this is a singular term for when you want to push your work up to GitHub. And then once it's in GitHub, other people can pull it. If you're collaborating with people, that's how it works. That's what it's for. It's like a backup. If your computer gets destroyed, you don't want to lose all of your work. It serves a lot of purposes. It's not that complicated to use. Once you're in here, there's pretty much only one thing to do, and that is create a repository. So we'll create a new repository. Give it whatever name you want. I'm going to call this VibeKit intro demo. And if you want to write a description here, you can do that. If not, don't. Visibility. I don't know why this defaults to public. Unless you want to build an app that is open source and everyone can see what you're doing if they want to, you should just make this private. Create a private repo. I think it should be the default. And now this is the link to your repository. You can copy that and you go to Claude. You just give it the link. A tip about using Claude as well. If you hold down Shift and Enter, you can go to a new line. If you click Enter, it's going to send the command. And then you can just say, this is my repository. It's empty. I want you to pull it to my computer and make a new folder for it. And then we're going to work on it. So it's going to pull the empty folder repository to your computer, and then it's going to open it up. And then we just have to do one more step. So the next step is environment variables. So this is very important. We'll get to why this is so important shortly, but for now, what are these? Okay, so in your app, there is going to be files with code. We have to authorize GitHub. And in this case, I've got another account running on this computer, so I'm going to connect to the new GitHub account. So we'll grant access first. I will just log in using my other GitHub account. This is a third GitHub account for this computer. You shouldn't need to redo this. Like, your experience will be a bit different because you don't already have other GitHub accounts. It's going to ask you to go through this. I want you to just run this for me. We'll give that a try. Otherwise, we can just click this button it's going to show us how to run this. It can definitely authenticate GitHub for us. So this is the one that we want. It should open up GitHub and then we sign in, we enter the code. So we just copy this, we open it, I'm signed in, we enter the code, and then we continue. And then we can authorize this computer to use this GitHub account. And then we come back here and authentication is complete. This part can be a bit tricky. It's fairly insistent sometimes that you are a developer and you know how to do stuff. You just insist back to it that you are not a developer and you just want it to do stuff for you. So now it's kind of ready. So it's saying, what are we building? We're not going to actually build anything yet. We want to go into environment variables or set up environment variables. So what are they? It's a place where you can put like values that are secrets, like your API keys, so that the app can use them, but it's not written into the code of the app, which is super important. And they can also be values, other values that you don't want to write directly into the code of the app. For example, like the URL of a webhook. You have a form on your app, and when you click the submit button, it sends to a webhook. Now, let's say you want to change it 3 weeks later to go to a different place. Instead of having to open your code, change it, redeploy it, go through this process, you just go to your hosting environment and you change the environment variable. So there's a few different purposes for this, but the crux of this is that it should live in a file in the repo, but it should not be committed. So it should be ignored by the repo when it sends to GitHub. Before we begin, let's set up an environment variables file. Make sure that it is not going to be uploaded to GitHub. And then give me the link so I can open it. Can you also add some dummy values in there? I'm doing a demo where I'm showing people how environment variables work. If you didn't do this, if you didn't initiate this, as soon as you start building an app, Claude is going to initiate it, right? The key part though is that you might be tempted in some cases to just say, here's the value, can you add it to my environment variables file? You want to be very careful doing that. By the way, if you just want to let Claude go ham, you can do that to avoid constantly clicking yes, 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 accept. So look, here's the environment variable file. Here's the file that tells GitHub to ignore that file. And then here is the example, right? So it looks like this. It can be a little bit intimidating, and that's where the temptation might come in to just tell Claude, here's the value, add it. But if you've got an Airtable API key, you don't want to paste it in here. These chat logs go everywhere. They're going to be on Claude servers. It's going to end up with your API key in the sort of long-term memory of an AI that you don't control. So just don't do it. This is the safe way to do it. And this is why the environment variable files exist, because you can put values in here and they're just sort of here. Unless somebody has access to your computer, literally, and knows where the file is, they can't get the value. It's the only place that it should exist. So yeah, you just paste in values here. If this were an API key, you would put it there. You don't have to put quotations or anything like that. And then once it's in there, you can ask Claude to read it and confirm that there's no problems, and you can do all of that. The only thing you don't want to do is paste the actual values through Claude. So that file, it only lives on your computer. It doesn't get committed to the repository, which means if somebody else pulls your Git repo, you want to collaborate with them, you might have to also give them those values. And when you deploy it, you're going to need to add your environment variables there as well. So moving on to deployment and hosting, I'm just going to simplify this and say that there are two options. There's Vercel, which I would say is easier but less scalable. Okay, so Vercel is going to be easier right now and it's going to save you time. But later on, if you start to have a lot of traffic or a lot of activity on your app, it's going to cost you a lot more. Whereas Cloudflare pages cost practically nothing forever, but the user interface is more complicated. Cloudflare generally does a lot more things. So which one you choose, it can depend a lot on how you build your app. Okay, and we're going to get into that later as well. This is why I'm doing this project, because this is even the simplified version. If you just go and try and learn this on the basis of like, well, I'm going to explore every avenue, you will never get anything done. So pick one of these and just go for it. I would say if it's your first time, just go with Vercel. They're both free initially. Vercel, you're going to get locked in. If you choose Next.js later on, then you'll really just have to use Vercel. And for both of these, you can go to their management system and you can get an API key, and you can have Claude do pretty much everything you need to do on there as well, kind of the same way that we do with the Airtable connector. All right, so this part I'm going to skip over because it's just really a matter of choosing the one, creating an account, going there, and then choosing the GitHub file or repo that you want to deploy. The rest of it will just happen automatically. Now here is the really, really, really important part of this, guys, and I'm sorry it took a long time to get here, but the context is fairly important as well. And that is almost every framework, let's call them, that AI tends to use and seems to favor using is some sort of flavor of React, which is a flavor of JavaScript. I'm not a developer, by the way. This is me sort of paraphrasing. I know that there's argument like what's a framework and what's a language and so on. TypeScript, JavaScript. Don't worry about that. If you're a developer watching this, just understand this is not aimed at you. So the crux of this, though, is that if the app is loading in your browser or in anyone's browser, what is actually happening is your app, like all of the code that is in your repo, gets bundled up and then it gets downloaded into the browser like that. And then it fetches the data and it builds the page or the whole app. It builds almost the whole app in many cases. And when it does that, what it means is that your code is actually going to the browser of the person visiting the site. And they can see everything. They can see the code itself. They can understand how it works, especially with AI. Super easy to just go and inspect the browser and see how something is working. Right, here is an example. This is a vibe-coded blog that uses Airtable as a backend. And if I go and inspect this in sources, I can effectively read everything that's in this application. Actually, this is a Next.js app. This is not a good example because this uses methods to prevent that from happening. But they're going to be able to see stuff regardless. This is the point. You want to understand this, okay? They are, by their nature, generally insecure. So that could be fine or it could be hugely dangerous. Understand also that it's very easy to make mistakes, all right? When something goes wrong, okay, you can accidentally expose your entire repo, right? The raw code rather than the bundled code that's just intended to build your app. I mean, both of them are somewhat insecure, but this is a disastrous situation. And then you want to be careful as well because the API calls are made from where the app is running. And as we said, the app gets pulled into the browser of a complete stranger, and then it's calling to fetch the data from your database, which in this case is Airtable. Right? And in order to fetch that data, there has to be an API key. So you do not just connect Airtable to your app. There is a very important distinction here. These are terminologies, but there's like front end, back end, client side, server side. These very, very broadly and refer to the difference between the parts of your app that run inside the browser or the parts that run on a server somewhere else. So this is where you can use other methods to put something in between the app and Airtable. So I did a little AI Google search and this is what it sort of explained, just to double verify that I'm not leading you astray here, guys. Yeah, like you just put something in between your app and Airtable, so that it's not calling Airtable directly. It's calling something else that sits in the middle. And this is code that is not running in the browser of the user. This is code that's running on a server somewhere that only you can access, and the code is completely private, and it is going to attach the API keys, fetch the data from Airtable, and bring it back again. And this can happen like in a few different cases, or two different sort of methods for doing this are proxy versus intermediate database. There are a lot of differences, but the key difference is that a proxy takes one request, adds the API keys, gets it from Airtable, brings it back, and then returns it to the browser. It happens on the fly, live. Each request goes through the proxy and then comes back again. A database is where you would do this, but in a giant way. You sync everything into a database that sits here. So from your Airtable, you sync a whole bunch of data so that you have pretty much all the data that's needed for your app in the middle here. And then your app can just make requests to and from the database. And that is protected because the database can have a lot stricter permissions. It can be set up so that it's more secure and it doesn't pass through to all of your Airtable data. It just has the data that's needed for the app. And presumably your Airtable data has a lot more, and you're just using a subset of that for your app. So you can go with one of those options. And yeah, from there on, it's a question of like, which option do you go for? And that's where this VibeQuest comes in. I've boiled it down to the key options, or one primary example of each method. So if we skip through this, it's going to let you choose like an approximation of what kind of system you might want to build. So if you want to build a blog, it'll give you a template that you can just very quickly use in a prompt. And then you can see here it's specifying like the data model, all of this stuff. And then you go on, and here it lets you choose like which one of these methods you want to try out. So if you want to try all of them, you can do that. But I'm going to make videos that show you each one, and then you can pick the one that you like the best. They all work, but they have different pros and cons. And then when you go on, it will ask you like which agent you want to use, and you can, yeah, just sort of learn either by going through this and reading what the process will look like and not actually doing it, or you can actually do it. You can copy the prompt here, paste it all into Claude, and then let it build it. Or you can, before you paste it in, you personalize it further so that you get what you actually want out of it. You just use this as an example, but this takes you through the process of creating the environment variables and so on. And that's it, guys. This shouldn't be too daunting. I've added a lot of context here just to explain, but looking at that, this is not so much to learn to unlock the ability to build something like this in about your actual focus time, 15 minutes. You'll have to wait for Claude to build it, and then you'll have to do a bit of cleanup, but it's not bad at all for something that used to take a month and $5,000 to a developer, as well as having to explain to them what you actually want. All right, thanks guys. Good luck.